What would you do if you couldn't even afford to pay your rent? Not next year, not next month, right now. Imagine opening your bank account and realizing there isn't enough money to keep a roof over your head. The bills keep coming. Your landlord expects payment. Your dream feels impossible, and everyone around you is telling you the same thing. Get a real job. Would you give up? Or would you risk everything for an idea that sounds completely crazy? Because that's exactly what Brian Chesky did. Today, millions of people around the world book vacations with a single tap. Families stay in homes instead of hotels. Travelers experience cities like locals. Hosts earn income by opening their doors to strangers. It's so common today that we rarely stop to ask one question: how did this idea begin? Surely, a company worth billions must have started with millions of dollars, a team of famous investors, an office filled with experts, a perfect business plan, right? No. It began with 3 friends, an apartment, an unpaid rent bill, and a decision that almost everyone thought was ridiculous. Imagine telling people, "I'm going to build a company where strangers sleep in other strangers' homes." How do you think they would react? Would they invest, or would they laugh? Most people laughed, because sometimes the biggest ideas sound the most unbelievable. Brian Chesky wasn't born into extraordinary wealth. He grew up in Niskayuna, New York. As a child, he wasn't obsessed with becoming a billionaire. He was obsessed with creating, drawing, designing, building. He loved solving problems. While other children collected toys, Brian spent hours imagining new ideas, new products, new experiences. He didn't know it yet, but those small habits would shape the rest of his life. Have you ever noticed that success often leaves tiny clues long before anyone recognizes them? The world sees the billionaire, but it rarely notices the curious child. Brian eventually studied industrial design at the Rhode Island School of Design. Not business, not finance, not economics, design. Because he believed something simple: good design changes the way people experience the world. Think about that. Most entrepreneurs begin with products. Brian began with people. How they feel, how they interact, how they live. After graduation, he moved to San Francisco. The city was filled with dreamers, programmers, designers, entrepreneurs. Everyone seemed to be building the future. Brian wanted to be part of it. But reality arrived much faster than success. Rent was expensive. Money disappeared quickly. Finding stable work wasn't easy. Day after day, the pressure grew. Imagine chasing your dream while wondering whether you'll have enough money to stay in your apartment next month. Could you keep believing, or would fear convince you to quit? Then, one ordinary conversation changed everything. Brian's roommate, Joe Gebbia, noticed something unusual. A major design conference was coming to San Francisco. Hotels across the city were completely booked. Thousands of visitors needed somewhere to stay. The apartment had extra floor space. What if, instead of renting hotel rooms, people paid to sleep there? Not on luxury beds, on air mattresses with breakfast included. It sounded ridiculous. It sounded temporary. It sounded like something that would never become a real business. But sometimes history begins with ideas that sound completely impossible. Brian looked around the apartment. Empty space, no money, rent due. Then he asked himself one question: what if this actually works? That single question would eventually change the way the entire world travels. But before Airbnb became one of the world's most valuable companies, Brian Chesky would face rejection after rejection, failure after failure, and moments that nearly ended the dream forever. To be continued.
Have you ever had an idea that sounded so strange, even you weren't sure it would work? Imagine opening your apartment, not to friends, not to family, but to complete strangers. Would you do it? Most people wouldn't. In 2007, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia had no investors, no business plan, no famous connections, no money. Only one apartment and rent they couldn't afford to pay. So they bought a few air mattresses, created a simple website, and gave it a name: Air Bed and Breakfast. The idea was simple. Visitors coming to San Francisco could sleep on an air mattress, eat breakfast, and pay far less than a hotel. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't perfect. It was simply a solution to a problem. Think about that. The greatest businesses often don't begin with revolutionary technology. They begin by solving an ordinary problem in an extraordinary way. Then, something unbelievable happened. People actually booked. 3 guests arrived. One was from India, another from Boston, another from Utah. They slept in Brian's apartment. They shared breakfast. They talked for hours. Complete strangers became friends. When the weekend ended, Brian realized something much bigger than money. People weren't just paying for a place to sleep. They were paying for connection, for belonging, for experiences. That tiny realization would become the foundation of Airbnb. But one successful weekend doesn't build a billion-dollar company. The conference ended, the guests went home, the bookings disappeared, and reality returned. The rent was still due, money was still running out, the website had almost no visitors. Imagine standing in your apartment, looking at empty air mattresses, wondering if your dream had already ended. Would you quit? Many people would have. Brian didn't. Instead, he invited another friend, Nathan Blachachik, a talented engineer. Together, the 3 founders believed they could build something much bigger, not just for conferences, for the entire world. There was only one problem. Nobody else believed them. Investors listened politely, then rejected them again and again and again. Some investors believed people would never trust strangers. Others believed no one would ever open their home to someone they'd never met. Some simply laughed. Imagine walking into another meeting, explaining your dream, watching people smile, not because they're excited, but because they think your idea is impossible. How many times could you hear no before you stopped believing? Brian heard it more times than he could count. Money became so tight that even paying everyday expenses felt impossible. The company needed cash immediately. Without it, Airbnb would disappear before the world even knew its name. Then, something happened that almost sounds unbelievable. The United States presidential election was dominating the news. Everywhere Brian looked, people were talking about politics. Most entrepreneurs ignored it. Brian saw an opportunity. Instead of asking, "How do we raise money?" he asked, "What are people already paying attention to?" That single question led to one of the most creative survival strategies in startup history. And it wouldn't involve technology, or investors, or venture capital. It would involve breakfast cereal. Yes, breakfast cereal. It sounded ridiculous, but sometimes the craziest ideas become the ones that keep a dream alive.
Have you ever been so desperate that your next decision could determine whether your dream survived or disappeared forever? Imagine opening your company's bank account. The balance is almost zero. The bills keep arriving. Investors keep saying no. Your product isn't growing fast enough, and your friends are beginning to ask, maybe it's time to move on. That's exactly where Brian Chesky found himself. Airbnb wasn't famous. It wasn't profitable. It wasn't even considered a serious company. To most people, it looked like a failed experiment. But Brian refused to let the story end there. Then, something unbelievable happened. America was in the middle of the 2008 presidential election. Every television, every newspaper, every conversation, people were talking about Barack Obama and John McCain. Most entrepreneurs ignored it. Brian saw an opportunity. He asked himself, what if we could turn the biggest news story in America into enough money to keep Airbnb alive? It sounded crazy, but then again, every important decision in Airbnb's history had sounded crazy. So Brian and his co-founders designed 2 limited edition cereal boxes, one called Obama O's, the other Cap'n McCain's. These weren't ordinary cereal boxes. Each one became a collectible, hand-packed, designed by the founders themselves. Imagine 3 startup founders not writing code, not pitching investors, but folding cereal boxes late into the night, hoping strangers would buy them. Would you have believed this could save a technology company? Most people wouldn't. But the impossible happened. People loved the idea. Collectors bought them, supporters bought them, curious customers bought them. The founders sold hundreds of boxes. They raised around $30,000. $30,000. Not millions, not billions, but enough to keep the dream alive. Think about that. Sometimes success doesn't arrive as a giant breakthrough. Sometimes it arrives as just enough hope to survive one more month. Have you ever felt like giving up only to discover one more day changed everything? That's exactly what happened. The cereal boxes didn't build Airbnb, they bought time. And sometimes, time is the most valuable investment of all. But Brian still faced the same problem. The company wasn't growing fast enough. People visited the website, then left. Very few completed a booking. The founders couldn't understand why. Was the idea wrong? Were people simply afraid? Or was something else stopping them? Instead of guessing, Brian decided to meet his customers. He flew to New York, not to raise money, not to attend conferences, to knock on doors. Imagine the CEO of a tiny startup walking into strangers' apartments, asking, "Can you show me your listing?" He noticed something surprising. The apartments looked much better in real life than they did online. The photographs were dark, blurry, uninviting.
People weren't rejecting the homes, they were rejecting the pictures. Think about that. How many opportunities have we lost, not because we weren't good enough, but because we failed to show our true value? Brian didn't tell hosts to take better photos. He rented a professional camera and photographed many listings himself. Beautiful lighting, clean angles, warm, welcoming images. Almost immediately, bookings increased. One simple improvement changed everything. That's the power of listening. Instead of asking, "Why don't people like us?" Brian asked, "What problem are they actually experiencing?" Great entrepreneurs don't fall in love with their product. They fall in love with solving problems. Then, something happened that changed Airbnb forever. A small startup accelerator called Y Combinator noticed them. Most people had never heard of it, but inside Silicon Valley, it was becoming one of the most respected startup programs in the world. Brian didn't realize it yet, but one conversation was about to change the future of Airbnb forever. And one mentor would teach him a lesson that every entrepreneur should hear.
What if the one opportunity that could change your life came disguised as another rejection? Imagine walking into a small office. No famous investors, no billion-dollar promises, just a few entrepreneurs trying to convince someone that strangers staying in strangers' homes could become the future of travel. Most people still believed the idea was impossible, but one man looked beyond the numbers. His name was Paul Graham, the co-founder of Y Combinator, one of Silicon Valley's most respected startup accelerators. When Brian Chesky and his co-founders pitched Airbnb, Paul wasn't impressed by their website. He wasn't impressed by their revenue. He wasn't impressed by their technology. He was impressed by their determination. Think about that. Sometimes investors don't invest in products, they invest in people. They invest in founders who refuse to quit. Paul Graham accepted Airbnb into Y Combinator. The investment wasn't huge, around $20,000. For many people, that amount doesn't sound life-changing, but for Brian, it meant something much bigger. Someone finally believed. Imagine hearing no dozens of times, then finally hearing yes. Wouldn't that one word change everything? But the money wasn't the greatest gift. The advice was. One day, Paul Graham gave Brian a simple challenge. He said, "Go meet your users." Not once, not online, in person. Brian didn't argue. He got on a plane. He visited hosts. He sat in their living rooms. He listened. He asked questions. He watched how people actually used Airbnb. And then he realized something profound. The company wasn't in the business of renting homes. It was in the business of building trust. Think about it. Would you sleep in a stranger's house if you didn't trust them? Would you allow a stranger into your home if you felt unsafe? Of course not. Trust was the real product, not the apartment, not the website. Trust. That realization changed Airbnb forever. The company introduced better photos, verified profiles, reviews, ratings, secure payments. Every improvement answered one question: how do we help complete strangers trust each other? Have you ever noticed the biggest companies often solve emotional problems before they solve technical ones? Airbnb wasn't selling beds, it was removing fear. Then something unbelievable happened. Bookings started growing, not a little, rapidly. City after city, country after country. More hosts joined, more travelers booked.
People who had laughed at the idea started using it themselves. Imagine watching the same people who once doubted you become your customers. How satisfying would that feel? But success brought new challenges. Growth exploded, servers struggled, customer support became more difficult. The company needed more employees, more investment, more leadership. Every day felt like controlled chaos. Brian often worked into the night. Meetings, hiring, product decisions, investor calls, travel, pressure. Success looked glamorous from the outside. Inside, it was exhausting. Have you ever achieved something you've always wanted, only to realize the responsibility became even greater? That's what leadership feels like. The higher you climb, the stronger the wind becomes. But the hardest test was still ahead, because the world was about to face a crisis that would bring global travel almost to a complete stop, and many people believed Airbnb would never recover.
Have you ever reached the top, only to discover that your greatest challenge was still waiting? By the late 2010s, Airbnb had become one of the fastest-growing companies in the world. Millions of travelers were booking homes. Millions of hosts were welcoming guests. The impossible idea had become a global movement. Investors who once rejected Brian Chesky now wanted to invest. The company was valued at billions of dollars. It looked like the dream had finally come true. But history has a strange way of testing every great company one more time. Then, something happened that no one could have predicted. In early 2020, the world changed overnight. Airports became silent, borders closed, flights were canceled, cities locked down. The COVID-19 pandemic spread across the globe. Think about Airbnb's business for a moment. It depended on one thing: people traveling. And suddenly, the entire world stopped traveling. Imagine waking up one morning and watching nearly everything your company depends on disappear. Within weeks, Airbnb's business collapsed. Bookings fell dramatically. Revenue dropped. Fear spread throughout the company. Many people believed this was the end. Brian Chesky later described it as one of the hardest moments of his life. Not because he was losing money, but because thousands of employees and millions of hosts depended on Airbnb. How do you lead when nobody knows what tomorrow looks like? Would you panic? Would you hide? Or would you face the truth, no matter how painful it was? Brian chose honesty. He gathered his leadership team. Difficult decisions had to be made. The company couldn't continue operating the same way. Then came one of the hardest decisions any CEO can make. Airbnb reduced its workforce significantly. Thousands of talented people lost their jobs. Imagine writing that message, knowing every sentence would affect someone's family, someone's future, someone's dream. Brian didn't write a cold corporate announcement. He wrote with empathy. He explained why the decision was necessary. He thanked employees for their contributions. He offered generous support where the company could. The letter was widely praised, not because layoffs are good, but because people saw genuine respect. Think about that. Leadership isn't measured only during success, it's measured during crisis. Anyone can celebrate victories. Real leaders stand up when everything is falling apart. But then, something unbelievable happened.
Instead of waiting for the world to return to normal, Airbnb adapted. The company noticed a new pattern. People weren't flying across continents, they were traveling closer to home. Families wanted larger spaces, remote workers wanted longer stays. Travel itself was changing. Brian asked a familiar question: what do people need now? Not what worked yesterday. That mindset changed everything. Airbnb updated its platform. Long-term stays became more important. Flexible booking options expanded. Hosts adapted. Guests adapted. The company adapted. Have you noticed the pattern? Every time Airbnb faced its biggest challenge, it didn't cling to the past. It listened, it learned, it evolved. And slowly, the numbers began improving. Travel returned, bookings increased, confidence came back. Then, in December 2020, Airbnb did something many experts thought would be impossible just months earlier. The company went public. Its stock market debut became one of the biggest technology IPOs of the year. Think about that journey, from sleeping on air mattresses because rent couldn't be paid, to building one of the world's most valuable travel companies. But perhaps the greatest lesson wasn't the billions. It was something much more powerful. The courage to keep believing when almost everyone else stopped. And the final chapter of Brian Chesky's story contains a lesson that every entrepreneur, every dreamer, and every person chasing success needs to hear.
What if I told you that Airbnb was never really about homes? It was never about apartments. It was never about air mattresses. It was always about one thing: believing that complete strangers could trust each other. Think about that. Every great company changes an industry, but the greatest companies change the way people think. Before Airbnb, most people would never have imagined staying in a stranger's home. Today, millions of people do it every single year, not because the world became less dangerous, because trust became easier. That's what Brian Chesky built, not just a technology platform, a bridge between people. Imagine looking back at the apartment where everything began. 3 friends, no money, no investors, rent overdue, air mattresses on the floor. If someone had walked into that apartment and said, "One day this idea will be worth billions of dollars," would anyone have believed it? Probably not, because success always looks obvious after it happens. But while you're living through it, it's filled with uncertainty, with fear, with sleepless nights, with rejection. Brian Chesky once faced investor after investor, hearing the same answer: no. People said strangers would never trust strangers. People said hotels would always win. People said the idea was too risky, too strange, too unrealistic. Imagine if Brian had listened. Imagine if he had accepted the first rejection, or the 10th, or the 100th. Millions of people would never have discovered a completely different way to travel. Thousands of hosts would never have earned extra income. An entire industry might never have changed. Have you ever wondered how many world-changing ideas disappear simply because someone quits too early? That's why persistence matters. Not because persistence guarantees success, but because quitting guarantees you'll never know what's possible. Brian Chesky also taught another lesson.
a lesson every entrepreneur should remember. Don't build what you want, build what people need. Every major breakthrough at Airbnb came from listening to hosts, listening to guests, listening to problems. The photographs, the reviews, the trust system, the flexible stays, none of these ideas came from guessing. They came from paying attention. Sometimes your customers already know the answer. You simply have to be willing to listen. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: success isn't about having the perfect beginning. Brian didn't start with millions of dollars. He didn't graduate from the world's top business school. He wasn't born into a powerful business family. He started with a problem, a rent bill, an empty apartment, and the courage to ask one simple question: what if? What if strangers stayed here? What if people trusted each other? What if impossible wasn't actually impossible? History belongs to people who ask, what if? Maybe today you're standing where Brian once stood. Maybe your bank account is almost empty. Maybe people don't believe in your idea. Maybe you've heard no so many times you're beginning to believe it yourself. Don't let someone else's doubt become your future. Remember this: every legendary company was once called unrealistic. Every billionaire was once unknown. Every breakthrough was once impossible. Every empire began as an idea that someone laughed at. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you have everything. Start with what you have. Improve every day. Listen carefully. Adapt quickly. And never let rejection decide your future. Because success doesn't belong to the smartest person in the room. It doesn't always belong to the richest. Sometimes it belongs to the one who simply refuses to stop building. One idea, one customer, one decision, one day at a time. Because every entrepreneur, every company, every empire, every legend started from zero. And maybe the next story the world will remember is yours.